episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, once again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Atalaya Sergi, who is director of AmeriCorps Senior, which is part of AmeriCorps, officially known as the Corporation for National and Community Service, or CNCS, which is an independent agency of the United States government and engages more than 5 million Americans currently in service through its programs, including AmeriCorps Vista, AmeriCorps State and National, AmeriCorps Seniors, the Volunteer Generation Fund, and many other national service initiatives. The agency's mission is to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement through service and volunteering. And while a government agency, AmeriCorps acts very much like a foundation, is the nation's largest annual grant maker supporting service and volunteering. Was created by the National and Community Service Trust Act in 1993. Ms. Sergi brings 20 years of experience in service, community engagement, and education to this role. She has worked in public school districts and the nonprofit sector, bringing both private and public organizations together to ensure citizens of all ages and those underserved communities can thrive. Most recently, she served as the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Programming at Jumpstart for Young Children, where she managed the AmeriCorps State and National and AmeriCorps Senior programs from the grantee level, launching her former organization's only Foster Grandparent program. Ms. Sergi has been a member of several advisory committees, councils, and coalitions, including as a founder of Los Angeles Generation to Generation, which focused on engaging older adults to support young children across LA County. She was also elected as an Encore Fellow, using her time to write about the positive impact seniors can have in educational settings. Ms. Sergi has earned a master's degree in social work from Virginia Commonwealth University, her bachelor's degree in sociology from University of Virginia, and we have a lot to talk about today. Atalaya Sergi, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us.
Thank you, Ira. I'm really excited to be here and excited to talk about the work that we're doing at AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps Seniors, and just to share a little bit about my pathway there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'd love to start off, as we typically do, by handing you the floor for a little bit, just to talk a little bit more about you. We'd love to hear everything from where you grew up, when you first developed your interest in sociology and social work, and a bit of that early career journey. I think that'd be a great way to set the stage for what we've been talking about.
Okay, great. So I grew up in Central Virginia, in a very rural community. It's called Rice, Virginia. Most people have no idea where that is located.
I don't know where that is.
If you know Farmville, Virginia, some people know that. Greenfront is very popular, and there's a college, Longwood College, university now is there as well. So Rice is about a 15-minute drive east of Farmville, Virginia, in Central Virginia. And so I grew up in a very rural community. In my community, right around my home, I also grew up in a very multi-generational setting. So my grandparent lived across the street, a great grandparent when I was younger, uncles, aunts, great uncles and aunts, cousins of all ages. And so being in that environment, now looking at that multi-generational kind of setting that I grew up in, I understand all of the benefits that I received, the mentorship, the guidance, the safety to try new things, and to always know that there was someone there to care for me. So that was really great. And I think that, as we get older, we understand how when we were growing up and the things that we experience sometimes impact us in deep and profound ways that we don't actually know until we get older and we look back. So that was the environment I grew up in a working class family. My mother worked in a factory and was studying to become a nurse. My father is a carpenter by trade, owns his own business now. And my stepmother, my biological mother passed away when I was younger. My stepmother is a teacher. So we have a lot of service-oriented people in my family, which also I think impacted my view and orientation to the world and to becoming a social worker. So you asked a little bit about how I became interested in sociology and social work. I think living in that environment made me very interested in the social connection, in, how does society, culture, relationships really connect people and what behaviors come out of that. I think what really drew me to social work and also to education was that growing up in Rice, it is in Prince Edward County. And so Prince Edward County has a lot of great things about it, but it is also known for being really involved in massive resistance and closing its public schools instead of integrating them. And so in my family, both my father and my aunt, my maternal aunt, both didn't finish high school because the schools closed for 5 years. They were the oldest in their family. Their families were low income. And so they eventually ended up going to work to help support the families. And so they both never had that kind of high school graduation experience. And so growing up, education was always stressed in the house. We just grew up knowing that you definitely finished high school and you went to college. And I tell people a lot, in my house, college was like graduating from high school. That's when the whole entire family came. High school was kind of like a given. And so the sociology part and growing up in that environment, but then having that experience within my family and, in my ancestry around having your education taken from you was really instrumental in kind of the thinking. And so when I discovered social work in college, read about it, met some people, it really kind of fit. So, knowing the things around sociology, but how do you use that to make sure that everyone has a pathway to a better life, has the things that we should all take as rights, the right to an education, an equality education. All of those became important, and I think kind of solidified going into studying those areas and then going into the field as a social worker. And I started my career in a school setting. So I was a school social worker for many years in Charlottesville, Virginia, became a school counselor and had the opportunity to create programming. And so I think that's where the service part started to come in. I spoke about the kind of service-oriented activities in my family, but when I was able to create some programs, some of the things that I got to do there was have college students from the University of Virginia come in and mentor our students and tutor our students. And so they were in this kind of service opportunity to our students. And so I saw that relationship between those two generations and how it kind of definitely benefited our students in their social development, their academic, their aspirations to maybe attend college or do some type of additional learning themselves after high school. But I also saw how it really benefited the college students and how they kind of found their pathways. They, built kind of soft skills that would, help them when they went on to work wherever they were going. And just what they learned about the students, the community. You can get very isolated on your campus based on when you are on a campus like the University of Virginia, it's self-contained. So this was an opportunity for them to come into the community. So that was the first kind of opportunities I had to do service. And then I created an after-school program for African-American girls that we integrated a service component to teach them things like public speaking, to teach them service to others. We would take them over to the elementary school and they would read to the children. They did public service announcements. They did announcements within the school for history, to talk about specific people in history. And so by being able to create these service opportunities for the college students, for the young ladies at the school, and then a whole school service learning program for 5th and 6th graders for the city of Charlottesville, I really began to see the impact that service can have. So then there was Jumpstart, so I finished up in Charlottesville. My husband and I moved to Los Angeles, and I really wanted to stay connected to education. So when I saw the job description for Jumpstart and their focus on early education and service and the connecting the community, it really spoke to me. And that's where I found, got the opportunity to launch the Foster Grandparent program, and really see that added little piece of magic, I would say, that having older adults in that multi-generational setting had. They really impacted the children that they were serving in the preschool setting, but also the teachers. We had teachers that would start to talk about how having those older adults in their classroom really helped them to see their work as important, as valuable, to help them build more skills, and to see that they had support for that. And then parents, they were able to speak to parents about parenting, and answer their questions. And our volunteers at AmeriCorps Seniors are recruited from the community. So those volunteers also saw families out in the community, in places of worship or at the grocery store, at the doctor's office, and really got to connect with them. So parents started to talk about what a great benefit it was. And then I think for myself and my staff, we really learned a lot more about issues that older adults face, how we could support them. We saw older adults' health improve as they went through the volunteering with us, and how long they stayed in the program. So I think my career kind of meanders, but always stays along the pathways of having education, incorporating service, and being a public servant is kind of the things that my career path has shown me.
Excellent. Really fascinating journey. Really fascinating. And as I'm listening to your story, and I'm walking through it with you, your Charlottesville City Schools, on the Jumpstart, you in both of those situations, you learn about the importance of this intergenerationality, and then you talk about that magic for that next stage of intergenerationality. Before we start talking about AmeriCorps Seniors, I was just wondering, in those environments, as you saw some of those magic sparks, were there any sort of things that stood out that were, really added that extra magic? I can imagine, the things that I can't talk about to my kids, but my in-laws can, whether it's, the Holocaust or, something from World War II. Any interesting sort of stories that stand out from those periods of time where like, wow, these, we'll call elders, this is where the magic lies, the stuff that, I as the younger elder can't provide to these kids.
I think that some of the things that I remember from that time was children who lived far from their grandparents, and never really got to spend a lot of time with them, really connected to the older adults that were in the classroom. And they are called foster grandparents, but they're volunteers, but they really kind of would refer to them as grandma so-and-so or grandpa so-and-so. Also, our group of volunteers were very multi-ethnic. So we had people from all different ethnicities and backgrounds, and that allowed for them to bring their culture into the classroom. So we had African Americans, we had a large group of Filipino elders. We started to have more Latin elders. And so they were able to bring in their culture and share that with the children and also share that with each other. We saw great bonds between our volunteers. And I think like those were things that also really impacted the teachers. They had someone that they could talk to at a different level, who understood how to work with children, of years of parenting, or we had even retired teachers. And so they could be mentors to the teachers in the classroom as well. And those were some of the things that we started to hear from the teachers that we did not expect to hear. I would say there was one other experience for me where I was driving the group of our elders to a celebration event, and I got to hear them talk about their work history, about having a household and living in an urban environment, and just about their stories of growing up as, African American women. And so I think when they shared those stories with me, that was learning for me as a younger African American woman of like how they navigated the world. And so those are stories and things that I still take away from that experience. And I have one or two of our volunteers who still email me every once in a while just to check in on me, which is really heartwarming and nice.
That is, I can think some of those stories of my own family too. My mother always, may she rest in peace, but she was always like, whenever I used to take a plane somewhere, she's like, "You're not going to wear a tie." And it was like harking back to this day of like, where flight, it was something, you really got dressed up for, and, you had to represent your best. And I was like, "No, Mom, I'm wearing a t-shirt and shorts," but that's okay. Anyway, back to you. I introduced, a little bit of the background history for Corporation National and Community Service, AmeriCorps Seniors, which is your domain, part of this. Take us a little bit on a walk about sort of the history of how you've gotten from sort of the inception of this. I was looking at some of the fascinating data, 200,000 volunteers currently serving, 47 million hours of service activity. You have over 1,000 veterans who are AmeriCorps senior volunteers. Take us through how you built up this amazing organization.
So AmeriCorps, there are the 4 programs that you mentioned in the beginning. AmeriCorps Seniors, AmeriCorps Vista are amongst the oldest, and they were created back in the 60s. And so both of them were focused on poverty. So their entire focus is to serve communities of poverty. The very first AmeriCorps program, which was a Foster Grandparent program, was both to focus on serving children, but to engage elders who were within a certain amount of the poverty line in service, and to provide them with a small stipend to support them. And then over the years, additional programs have been added. So we have 2 additional programs in AmeriCorps Seniors, which is our Senior Companion Program. That is another program that also has a stipend for an income eligibility for volunteers. And the Senior Companions Program is really focused on supporting older adults and those with disabilities to live independently. And so they really support day to day. They support in making sure that those individuals have resources and connections and stay engaged in their community in order to support their health and ability to age in place in their communities. And then we have our RSVP program, and RSVP is a program in AmeriCorps Seniors that is really governed by the communities in which they serve. And so communities can choose what is the issue that you feel like you can engage older adults in, and then they implement those programs. So RSVP programs can do things like mentoring and tutoring, but they also support in workforce development. They support in navigating benefits such as Medicare and Medicaid for people. They support in disaster. So many of the natural disasters that we have experienced lately, our RSVP members are on the ground helping people to recover from those and to mitigate those impacts as much as they can. And those are the AmeriCorps Seniors program. So under AmeriCorps Seniors, there's the 3 umbrella programs. Foster Grandparents, which focuses on mentoring and educating children and helping them to progress. And then the Senior Companion Program and RSVP. In addition to VISTA, which is a set of other programs, is AmeriCorps State National, which you mentioned. They have programs all over the country. They also have commissions in every state that supports their programming. And then we have our National Civilian Community Corps, which we call NCCC. And they really go out and do really set projects. They are all younger people, and they go out in groups and support projects in different communities as needed. They also work a lot with FEMA. So you may see some of our members working with FEMA. That's more than likely are in CCC programs. So those are the 4 programs. We give out grants through 3 of those programs. We give grants to community organizations to implement programming, engaging volunteers in service in whatever area the program is focused on or the area that they feel like they need support in their communities. And we support them in that. So in addition to the programs that give out the grants, we have a whole nother team that is spread out across the country that provides support, technical assistance. They bring together community organizations to apply for our grants and then support them through the process of implementing our grants. So it's a large organization with a lot of reach. And as an organization, we are just really excited of the investments that we've had lately through the American Rescue Plan. We are hoping for additional investments so that we can engage even more Americans in service. And then we also have a few days of service that are one-time opportunities for people to engage with the national service. And they are on 9/11 Day of Service, and also coming up is our Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. And so that's an opportunity to really introduce communities to national service, introduce individuals who are participating in those programs to national service. I think of it also as a way of creating a pipeline, because most of our programs, you have to be 18 or over. AmeriCorps Seniors, you have to be 55 years of age or over. But this is an opportunity for young people to also come with their families or come with their friends to participate in service and learn a little bit more about other opportunities that are open to them as they grow up to continue to live a life of service.
Outstanding. Drilling down for a moment to a couple of these, I mean, the Foster Grandparent program, which you mentioned, you first got sort of exposed to that during your time at Jumpstart for Young Children. It has a very broad purview in the sense helping to guide students with higher academic achievement, mentoring troubled teenagers and young mothers, and then even care for premature infants or children with disabilities. Talk a little bit about this, if you would, and sort of are there qualities or the characteristics that you've seen that make either a good foster grandparent, but also what makes grandparents good at these things? Is it that they have more patience, more experience? Because some of this stuff is tough. I mean, I think as a parent, my kids are, I don't have troubled kids, but my kids were tough anyway. What makes grandparents good at these things? I mean, I understand. I see it. What have you seen along the way?
I think many of the things that you just mentioned, older adults do have a lot more experience. They've gone through both celebrations, but also trials and tribulations in their life. And they have a much longer perspective. So things that we might feel like are the end of the world, they know that there is a way forward, and they're able to share that with patience, with calmness, with guidance. And so I think like that really helps them to be able to help both young children, young mothers, teachers to kind of move forward when they're working with them. I also think that they do have patience. So many times, you know, children and adults need a little repetition in their learning, and they're willing to do that. They're willing to read books with children 4 and 5 times because they enjoy being able to have that kind of relationship and to be doing something that they feel is purposeful and they can see progress. And so I think that they have that patience. They have the patience to do that and to wait to see the child kind of finally grasp onto the concept or whatever it is, the skill that they are trying to teach them. So I think like those are characteristics. I also feel like with all of our AmeriCorps Seniors programs, having older adults from the community also allows those older adults to bring with them not only their life experience, their the things that they have learned through their career, but also their social networks. So they bring those things to also support their project, to support the children or adults that they are serving. And so I feel like that is a little bit of the difference of what they bring. Our volunteers also serve for about an average of 7 years. So you think about that in terms of a relationship with a child. They may have that relationship with that child for their entire elementary school time or their entire high school time. So they have the opportunity to build deep and strong relationships with a child. And then with our other programs, they bring that continued capacity to a nonprofit or a community organization that's trying to meet a need. When you have to continuously retrain, it takes time. It takes away from you being able to move quickly forward. And I think because they are such long-term, committed, and determined volunteers, they allow for a building of that capacity within their community and the organizations that they serve with.
Excellent. As far as the senior companion program, and you mentioned a very important phrase that we talked about in the past on the show, aging in place, and this desire, really the importance of our elders in living where they want to live and living in their home for as long as possible. And it really, it can't be overstated how important this is to someone's vitality as they get into the later years, much greater than most people would think. Talk a little bit about this theme of aging in place and some of what the program focuses on, in this case, daily tasks, things that, maybe shopping, paying bills, not maybe complex caregiving, but something that just makes somebody more ease staying in their home and hence just happier and more resilient in the long term. Talk a little about this, if you would, for the Senior Companion Program.
Yeah, so our Senior Companion Program, like I said, serves individuals that are wanting to age in place, but may be homebound or may have some disabilities where they are a lot less mobile. So by having a senior companion be able to come in and help, most of the time the work that they do is in the home. They come in and visit. Being able to have them come in and help with the daily living allows for that older adult not to have to move into institutional care or some type of facility for a much longer time. They help with things like daily chores, so making sure that the environment stays clean and there's no things that might aggravate someone's health. They have the opportunity to check in and make sure that the home is set up if someone has a disability so that they can function in their home and be safe when they are alone. They also do things like bring in public health kind of information about preventative care and help people to really connect with the services in their community that can help them with that. And that allows the individual to stay healthy longer and remain in their home. They also provide support, respite support. So say that there is an individual living with a family member. By providing that family member with a little bit of respite support during the month, it allows them to be able to also keep that family member in their home, take care of themselves, reduce the stress of caregiving, which allows them to stay, the older adult to stay in the home with their family longer as well, if that is their living situation. We have also had several of our senior companion volunteers really intervene into a situation where an older adult might have, have to move out of their home. So there was a volunteer who, their companion that they were going to visit, she had not heard from her for a while. And so she really got the person at the apartment complex to open the door and found that her companion had fallen and had, fainted. And so if she had not been persistent and had not been on a regular schedule to visit her, that could have ended very badly. So we've had senior companions really help with that. They also help to make sure that if there is an elder in a home, they can help them avoid fraud or abuse as well. So they really are integral to that independent living, remaining in your community, and staying in the home longer. And we know that more and more older adults are choosing to age in place, age in their communities, age in their homes. And so this is going to be a growing area for our country also as our demographics change and we become an older society. It will just be a place where we will grow in need. And so we are hopeful that we can grow our AmeriCorps Seniors programs to be a part of helping to meet that need.
And the flip side of that, whether we're talking about the Senior Companion Program or the Foster Grandparent Program, it's reported in the material that the volunteers themselves, better health, better longevity, and this goes back to another important theme that we talked about on the show. We don't think about it much, but loneliness combined with loss of a sense of purpose is, I think I saw something that's like smoking a couple packs of cigarettes a day, and you're giving these people back purpose and connection. Talk a little bit about some of the reported health and longevity benefits from the volunteers themselves.
Yeah, so I see AmeriCorps Seniors as a multi-beneficiary type program. So those that are receiving the service are benefiting, but those that are actually performing the service are also benefiting. So we did a longitudinal study in 2019 and found that 84% of volunteers reported improved or stable health during their time of service. And that is in a time when most of the time we see health declining as we get older. They had improvements, they felt stable in their health. We also saw that 88% of volunteers reported a decrease in feeling isolation and 78% felt less depressed. So we know that social isolation can also exacerbate health issues. And so by keeping them engaged in the community, giving them that purpose that you spoke about, it really helps them to also find that their health improves. And the thing that is really nice and why I'm so excited to be working with AmeriCorps as a director of AmeriCorps Seniors is that I saw all of this firsthand when I was overseeing the Foster Grandparent program at Jumpstart. We had a volunteer who started out coming in a wheelchair with her friends and family that would bring her. She progressed over the course of the time that she was volunteering with us to a walker and then to a cane. And some days she didn't need any of that. Going back and forth to the school, getting up, moving around with the children really improved her physical health and helped her to regain a quality of life. And she talked a lot about that, and we got to actually see it, which was amazing. We also had volunteers that reported improvement in their blood pressure over the course of their volunteering with us. It was one of the things that we gathered for a different funder that we reported out. We also had a volunteer who did an interview with Encore.org and talked about how prior to joining the volunteer program, she was really depressed. She had lost her son, and she had just fallen into depression. She was staying at home. She wasn't going out. She said she spent most of her days watching TV. And then when she joined this volunteer program, and her daughter recommended her, so we do have some families that volunteer together in some of our programs, that after starting to come, like, she really found a reason to get up. She found a reason to get dressed and get out of the house. She was excited to go to the school because she knew the children and the teachers were waiting for her and depending upon her. So it really gave her found purpose in her life. And she talked a lot in that video just about how it really lifted her out of her depression and really got her back into life and back into her community. So those health benefits, that we see in the reports, I actually have faces in my mind that I can attach to those numbers. And so I know it's something that all of our programs around the country see in their volunteers. And when we've had roundtables with our volunteers, they have talked about that. They've talked about that impact on them, their health, but also giving them purpose. Now that they were transitioning into this new part of their life, they could find a way to continue to give to their community, continue to use their skills. I remember a roundtable that I did fairly early on when I started last year with an organization in New York. And there was a volunteer who had been a financial advisor in his past. And he was wondering, well, what am I going to do when I retire from this? And so he joined the RSVP program there. And he is now helping those that are transitioning out of homelessness to really understand finances, build their budgets, stay on track, and understand how that can help them remain in their home. And so he said, I've always wanted to make sure that others could retire and do what they wanted to do. But this is another level of purpose that I found when you're talking about helping someone to transition out of homelessness and find a home and kind of regain that piece of their life.
That's a wonderful story. And I'm sure there's a lot of the younger generation that need to learn about finances as well. But that's a beautiful story, I tell you.
Yeah, and we try to do that too. In some of our programs, if they're co-located, we have the opportunity to sometimes connect them. So we have an RSVP program in Los Angeles that also has vistas. And at the end of the year, they did this training where the older adults helped the vistas with their interviewing skills. And so they did mock interviews over virtually because, not a lot of people can get together right now. And so virtually they did those. And so there are opportunities for our older adults and our AmeriCorps seniors volunteers to really pour into everybody's life and make things better from their experiences, both lived and learned. So
I tell you, we're coming. We just entered 2022. Obviously, we've had a tough couple of years with the pandemic. Any new initiatives coming up that you want to mention? And then also, how has COVID affected? I mean, obviously, you can do some things online, but what's been happening sort of COVID-wise, and how's that going to be affecting people?
Yeah, so COVID has been a challenge. I think for any and everybody who works with people, and definitely for volunteer organizations. And so AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps seniors are no different. We've been challenged by this. Our AmeriCorps seniors programs were kind of the first to feel that because it was identified early on that older adults were more at risk with COVID, even from the original COVID. And now we have the different variants as well. We were really excited that, by reports from our programs, a lot of the vast majority of our volunteers have been able to get their vaccinations and now get their boosters. So there is a lot more protection from them, but it is still difficult. Some programs are really trying to rebuild. We had older adults who needed to leave the program to be able to support their families when schools were closed, and when people, maybe they were having family members who had people coming in to help them. They took over that responsibility. So we are really in a recruitment period and really trying to build back up our volunteer force in AmeriCorps seniors. There's also challenges around getting back into what we call our service stations, where the volunteers serve in the community, because there's still a lot of restrictions, and different organizations and particularly schools need to be very careful for everybody's health and safety around that. I would say that even in the face of all those challenges, I have been really proud of our programs and our directors, our headquarters staff, in just their creativity to really still continue to serve their communities. So we did have a lot of programs that had never done online and virtual service before transition to that. We provided some resources for them to do that. We provided connections for them to get training for themselves and for their volunteers and equipment, and they took that on. And so I believe that even once we are past COVID, we still may have programs that do some type of hybrid in-person and virtual opportunities for volunteers. Some of the things that were good that came out of those virtual transitions with some programs were able to expand their reach. Where they couldn't get a volunteer to drive out to a certain location, they were able to reach children or other older adults or veterans in those locations using the virtual means. Some of those programs also talked about being able to recruit homebound older adults to actually become volunteers, because they didn't have to leave their home, and some of them were uncomfortable doing that, regularly throughout the week, but now they could do this in a virtual setting. And we also heard a lot of stories with programs that either did service virtually, some did their trainings virtually, some of them that could not get on broadband or did not have that equipment also did conference calls. That also was a way of helping our volunteers not to feel isolated. So they would connect them together. They would connect in small groups just to check in on each other and maybe talk about an article or a training that they've done to do reflection on that and how they could use that in their service in some way. Then some of our programs continue to do service, but socially distanced. So we have a lot of programs that work in food security. So they would maybe go into the home and spend a little time. They couldn't do that, but they continue to deliver meals to people through their front porches. Some of our meal delivery programs developed frozen meals that they could give to individuals to keep in their freezer, so they would have meals for longer periods of time. And there was also a lot of programs that did phone check-ins. So some of our senior companion programs, some of our RSVP programs started to also call and do check-ins, make sure people had what they needed, spend a little time, just connecting so that people knew that there was someone they could call if they had an emergency, or they had a resource to connect to other resources in the community if they needed anything. And even with the young people, being able to have older adults who could do things virtually with them, we also saw that they appreciated that connection. Some of the programs reverted to things like pen pals, which we might have done when we were in school.
Oh, yeah.
So, going back to that and how that really was a way to connect the older adults and the volunteers with children, because we know that a lot of children felt isolated during this period as well. So those were some of the things that continue to happen. And so we were really excited and just really proud that our programs could continue to serve their communities even through this, though it was challenging, and it still remains challenging and difficult. From that, some of the things that we want to continue and some of the initiatives moving forward. One, we want to continue to innovate on our programs. So we talked a little bit about that our society is aging, so we will have more older adults than young people. And we want to continue to think about how do our programs evolve as our older adults evolve. Older adults, they have always wanted to serve their community and leave it better. But they also want to do that knowing that they're making an impact. There might be opportunities for us to create programming that allows older adults to participate in a workforce development program through service if they want to change their career. We know a lot of people are retiring and then they just change to a different career, or they do something different in their field. And our service programs may be an introduction and an on-ramp to that. So we're looking at how do we think about the older adult workforce and what our programs can do for them in the same way that some of the other AmeriCorps programs do that for younger people. We want to learn from what happened in COVID. What was the impact on volunteers that were able to serve, not able to serve? What was the impact on the community organization's ability to serve their community when older adults weren't there, so that we can understand that impact and how we might mitigate if we needed to do this again in the future. But we also wanted to learn more about the innovations and the changes that program directors made. We have about 1,100 grantees across the country. So we are looking at a research project to ask those 3 questions so that we can take what we learned and include that more permanently in our programming where it's appropriate and where we saw benefits. And then to be able to also think about what new types of programming can we have where older adults can help us to really meet critical community needs. So thinking about the big push right now for public health. How can retired medical professionals support public health? We launched 2 programs out on the West Coast where retired medical professionals are helping. They were helping to dispense the vaccine. They're now helping with the booster. They are also helping some federally qualified health centers do preventative programming. So really being able to reach out into the community, to go out in the community and help people with, preventative health education that we all need for public health. So those are, that's an area where we are recognizing. I can't say that there wasn't always a need, but it's more highlighted now. And we want to try to, create more programming like that to support those efforts. We have a big initiative within AmeriCorps around public health. Right now it's centered in AmeriCorps State and National, but all the programs are really looking at how can they contribute. And I think that for all of the retired medical professionals and non-medical professionals that were older adults that came out to support their community during COVID, we have to find a way to keep them connected and keep them engaged in that type of work. I tell people all the time, when I went to get my first vaccination shot, everybody who greeted me was an older adult. And the young lady who gave me my shot was being supervised by an older adult. So we have to find a way to keep them engaged in this effort around public health. And then I think other places is looking at the other areas that have been really highlighted and impacted by COVID. Education. We were really moving towards a serious shortage in teachers. That has only been exacerbated by COVID and the experience there. And so is there a place for older adults who are interested in education, interested in early education, to use service as an opportunity to begin that pathway? When we think about climate change, how can we take older adults who have backgrounds in conservation, backgrounds in building, and help get them to help us to understand how we become greener as a country? So there are so many opportunities that we have to think about innovative and new programming and to evolve with older adults and our society. And so that's where our focus is going to be. The American Rescue Plan has given us an opportunity to begin that. Our current grant opportunity that's open through February, the beginning of February, is really focused on new communities and bringing new ideas about how older adults can support in our recovery as a country from COVID. And it's a first step in really thinking about the evolution of our programs.
Well, what a beautiful program. It's just fascinating. I listened to you talk about this for a while, and it's just an amazing set of initiatives and it's going to be really wonderful watching this continue to blossom, especially AmeriCorps seniors under your direction. Really great stuff, Atalayas.
Thank you.
What, just coming back to you for a moment, at the beginning of the show, you talked a bit about your background story and, of course, your family and their involvement in your life and your direction. Take a couple of minutes, if you would, just to talk about some of the other mentors, influencers that have come across your path, whether it's, in the Charlottesville City Schools, whether it's Jumpstart, whether it's within AmeriCorps. Take some time just to talk about some of the mentors that you've had along the way that have been really influential in keeping you with this passion and on this path.
Yeah, I think when you ask me that, there are 4 or 5 people that come to mind right away. So in the Charlottesville City Schools, Jim Henderson, who retired recently from the school system, he was a principal that I worked with. And he really gave me the opportunity to try new things and supported me in developing programs, bringing community into school. So it was in his school that I started the service learning projects and the after school program for the young ladies. And so he really opened the door to allow me to try new things. And I learned a lot from him about, trying something. If it doesn't work, go back, assess, do it again. And he gave me that space. And so I will always be thankful for that. And we still talk. So I still ask him questions and he still answers my calls, even today. So I really thank him as having someone that early in your career to kind of allow you to do that is just, you can't put a price on that for how it helps you develop moving forward. David Crippens is another mentor that I had the opportunity to meet in Los Angeles when I lived there. We still talk every month. I have a standing call with him where we connect. But he really challenged me to think strategically. He was like, no matter how stressed you are, no matter what is coming at you, you always have to stop, think strategically about what your goals are and what is the next step to get there. And I think for him, he is both a mentor, but he is a champion. So I think everybody should find a mentor, but then you also need to find yourself a champion. And by champion, I mean, like, he really advocates for me, opens doors for me, connects me to people. When I am having a challenge, he will say, okay, let me open up my Rolodex, which doesn't exist anymore, but let me open that up and let me see who I know that I can connect you with who can help you. Or I'm going to invite you to this call with me because I think you really need to get to know this person. You all have things that you can work on together and you can, grow from that. And so I really appreciate his mentorship. And like I said, we continue to talk each month. Another mentor that he actually introduced me to because I was learning more about development and fundraising is Taryn Forbes. She helped me to build my skill set there. And also she even trained my staff that I was overseeing in that. And she still helps me to figure out how to tell the story. She gives me great ideas about how do I tell the story of AmeriCorps seniors? How can I create opportunities to share that in new and creative ways and get other people involved? So I appreciate her ongoing kind of mentorship and guidance. And we've known each other for years now. And both Taryn and Mr. Crippens were a part of the Generation to Generation. So I really felt like they gave guidance and I did the work, which allowed me to build skills, to meet people, to get out into the community. So they were my co-founders on that, with one additional lady that I knew from there. And so, you know, that's kind of that mentorship, but also that champion that I talk about. And then Phyllis Siegel, I would identify as a person who really broadened my thinking around older adults in the intergenerational and co-generational spaces. So Phyllis Siegel, she is now a fellow at Encore.org, but she was on staff there before with Mark Friedman. And she really helped me to lift my thinking around intergenerational programming out of just the classroom. Okay. And think about it in other spaces. You know, how you live, who is in your circle, what are other things that intergenerational groups of people can make big changes in. And so I really thank her and thank Encore.org for that opportunity. I was also able to be an Encore Public Voices Fellow, applying through there, and you know, she highlighted for me that this was an opportunity that I should put my application in for, and that was great to really be able to think more broadly about that. And I, you know, recently I was recognized as an influencer in aging, and I have to say that their mentorship and guidance of those mentors and others that I haven't said anything about, so they're going to probably call me when they see this. I give them all credit for helping me to be recognized in that way. Each of them have poured things into my life and into my professional journey that helped me to get there. So I do recommend that everyone find a mentor, and when you have the opportunity to be a mentor.
Wonderful. Wonderful messages. And that's how I found you too. So yeah, that that's another good thing that came out of it. So I'd say really, as I said before, a really fascinating story and journey, and really wishing you and the whole organization, obviously, the best with all this moving forward in 2022. You're doing such important work. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode across our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Atalaya Sergi, Director, AmeriCorps Seniors, part of AmeriCorps, U.S. Corporation for National and Community Service. Atalaya, again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while. Thank you for everything you're doing there at AmeriCorps. And as we like to say on this show, thanks for helping to make a better tomorrow. You have a really fascinating story.
Thank you so much, Ira, and thank you for inviting me to share the story of AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps Seniors. And we are open to coming back and sharing more at any time.
I'd love to have you anytime. Really good seeing you.